Don't just live for tomorrow, or just live in yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today. And though you've come through many obstacles.
Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to Doom Patrol Season 2, Episode 3. So, this is going to be the last Doom Patrol for a while. And it's nothing against Doom Patrol, I'm not dropping it or anything, it's basically just going on a break. But the reason for this one isn't just to avoid burnout or anything, because this is only the third episode in. And I'm announcing this at the beginning instead of at the end. Not that I guess really matters, but this isn't because of burnout or anything, or even the possibility of such at this point. This is because, as you guys know, the schedule is changing up next week, and we have to make room for the Owl House. The Owl House is a priority show for me. It just has to be put into this slot at some point. So, obviously, Doom Patrol will return. But for the time being, we needed to make room, and this was really the only logical thing we could do with things switching around and everything. And Owl House technically being a donation reward slot, we needed to basically give it, a donation reward slot. And so we're basically moving the donation reward. Because as you know, Amphibia ended, and so we've kind of replaced that with our new poll slot, and that's in the Sunday slot now. Well, it's going to be for the new schedule, I should say. But that means we only have one donation reward slot left. And so since Owl House fills that, we need to put on hold this series for a time. And things will probably switch up again a little bit once Owl House Season 2B ends. Obviously we'll come back to Doom Patrol and everything, but we'll kind of handle that when we get to that. So yeah, this will be the last Doom Patrol reaction for a little bit, but we will come back to it in the future. Because obviously I enjoy this series and want to see where it goes. I mean, that's pretty blatant, I feel, at this point. So, I apologize for all of you who enjoy this, and for the fact that this just returned, because since we changed up the schedule and everything, and the introduction of the poll show, everything just kind of worked against me. It's like, I'm not the greatest at forethought in that regard, if I'm being honest. Everything just kind of worked against me to where I needed to excuse me. Everything just kind of worked against me to where I needed to change things up, and then the show I just recently began ends up having to take a break because of it. So, yeah. A little bit of my own fault there. But we're still going to enjoy this third episode, the last episode before this break. And when we come back, we will enjoy more of Doom Patrol. So, we got some updates last time with Cyborg, who had left. He's started going to this group and has met this girl. And they're getting along fairly well, and kind of teaching each other some things. Meanwhile, everyone else is kind of having to deal with their own stuff, um, as well as just the fallout from everything going on with Niles, as always. Larry has to go to his son's funeral, and while there, reconnects with his other son. He's invited to go join the family at a little gathering afterwards, and he almost does, but decides not to in the end. He gets distracted, goes into the barn, led there by the negative spirits, and finds um, a little offering for his now deceased son, which gets him very emotional before he eventually leaves and is apparently swarmed and kidnapped by butterflies. So that's a thing. Then we have Cliff and them back at the house, just kind of like trying to figure out what to do to help Niles with his new lack of immortality. He's dying, they're trying to help, they're trying to figure out how to help him. It's just like, okay, that's an interesting problem to deal with. And this is definitely building up a lot with Dorothy because she's clearly getting more and more stressed about this. She's just a little girl. She doesn't want to lose her father again, especially in this way. So she's really scared and definitely building up to maybe another deal with the Candlemaker, which is not good by any means. Jane, meanwhile, is having some issues with the other personalities trying to basically kick her out of the head spot. She's trying to keep them away completely, using drugs to stop them from coming out and taking over, but they're not really liking this. So they are trying to basically usurp the throne in a way. And we kind of learned about how her personality first started to diverge back when she was a kid, and how her mother like subjected her to a cult like church baptism, basically is what it comes down to, where they were trying to basically wash the evil out of her, and she basically had to pretend because, you know, she's not actually evil. And I was noting how it's like, just seems really fucking weird that they would think that kind of thing. And I think someone said in the comments that it's like that kind of thing did happen, and it's like, yes, I know, but it's still fucking weird because there's no reason for them to believe that she's possessed here. It's just, as as a Christian myself, I fully acknowledge and hate a lot of the history of Christianity, especially when it comes to shit like this. I understand it's real. I acknowledge it, but I hate it, and it bothers the shit out of me because it's so void of reality. Thinking that all these dumb things meant demon possession or shit, and it's like, just because they were so uneducated. And in certain times, yeah, like they just straight up wouldn't know because there wasn't that medical technology and medical knowledge back in that time that we have now. But a mental illness, like, I don't see how you could even consider thinking that that would look like a demon possession. That just doesn't make sense to me. Nothing about that just comes across as any sort of logical. It's like, yeah, you could assume there's something wrong with your kid, but demon possession? It just makes no sense. But either way, just a lot of fucked up shit in all of our characters' pasts, as we knew already. And so we're just kind of having to deal with it, just trying to see like what everyone can do. Uh, and yeah, kind of just go from there. We had roller disco, that was fun, and a time guy, I can't remember his exact name right now, um, who apparently wasn't wearing a helmet. It was just his head. And they killed him. But then somehow they were able to Rita was somehow able to turn back time using his face. Which, if he was, maybe he was just on the verge of death at that moment, but his brain was out of his head. He should have been straight up dead, right? I don't know. It's all wacky comic booky nonsense. So, I don't know. But that was a hope they had for a cure by getting the space element. I can't remember exactly what it was called. That was in the guy's head. Unfortunately, they failed and were kicked out, and just basically back to square one at this point. So yeah, a lot of shit has been going down, and at this point we just gotta wait to see where it goes. To see how these characters get through this all. And I'm definitely curious. Hopefully this episode doesn't end on a cliffhanger. That would suck considering we're taking a break after this. um, but we'll see. I assume we're going to get some follow-up with the butterflies in this one. Considering that was kind of, I guess you could say, the cliffhanger of last episode. That would, I feel, be the big thing to catch up on at the moment. Out of everything. So, hopefully we'll get to see more of Larry and what happened there. But, we're just going to get this started, hope for the best, and see what this episode has in store. So, when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episode. So, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So, this show goes into a lot of interesting, weird things, obviously. But I was not expecting Jack the Ripper. For those who don't know, the basic gist is that Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer from the late 1800s who was known for killing prostitutes. And the actual killer was never caught and never identified. The name Jack the Ripper was just given to them, I think, by a newspaper, maybe? I might be wrong about that. But it's interesting how in this universe, in the DC universe, apparently, Jack the Ripper was in reality this interdimensional being named Red Jack, who apparently had taken the guise of multiple serial killers from what we got in this episode throughout history. Red Jack is a being that thrives on the pain of others. He is actively... He's an active sadist who likes to cause as much pain and fear as possible because basically he gets a high off of it. In fact, it practically turns him on. So he's an interesting villain to go up against. But as we could see in this episode, he's not immortal. He's interdimensional, he's crazy powerful, but he's not immortal, which is interesting. Um, and I almost kind of feel like they could have made like a more ongoing story for this villain, had him be more of a recurring villain. But at the same time, I don't know how they would do that with his power and with basically everyone else being outmatched by him. It's just I just don't know how they would do that within the context of the series, you know. But Niles met him when he was a kid, and he didn't run. He when he saw Red Jack as Jack the Ripper kill this lady. And that comes back to play when Red Jack calls on him using Larry as a hostage. We find out that Red Jack also collects and controls butterflies, which is it's the explanation for what happened at the end of last episode. He had his butterflies kidnap Larry um, in order to use as bait, basically, a hostage, in order to get Niles to come to him. Because he wants Niles to be his apprentice, his charge, because he's bored, basically. He's bored and he's lonely, and he wants an apprentice to teach. But unfortunately, Niles has a conscience and is kind of refusing. So while we have Rita going around trying to find and save Larry, Red Jack just basically tortures Niles, turning him into a form of robot man at first, and then making him sprout these, like, painfully sprout these horrific butterfly wings out of his back. And it's like, which also happens to Larry and Rita as well. And it's just grotesque, I think is a good word for it. But Niles manages to get the upper hand and does manage to stab and kill Red Jack. So there is that, which allows everybody to get out and be saved. So throughout this, we do see some flashbacks of Larry and Rita when they first met. And now, as I've said in the reaction, these two have always been the closest of our group. They've always had the best connection and the best just overall relationship with each other compared to everyone else. So seeing how that all started is pretty interesting. And Larry, we find out, was actually a big fan of Rita and her works, which is pretty fun. And that throughout all of this, it was her who kind of gave him strength to continue on when he was extremely hateful of himself. And after the entire ordeal that goes on with Red Jack, he kind of starts to slip back into that self-deprecating pain. Luckily, Rita's there to tell him that it's okay and that she's there for him and that she's been through this too. And this allows Larry to just kind of break down as he needed to do and go in for a hug that he desperately needed. Yeah, Rita and him have a great relationship, and I really like what they've done with that. Obviously, they're not going to get together because, you know, he's gay, but it's still great to see a friendship that is this close, that is this supportive and loving and genuinely healthy. because there's a lot of relationships in this series that aren't. There's a lot of relationships that are extremely toxic in this series. And so to see a relationship that is this genuinely healthy is a really good thing, because it balances it out well. So we also follow Cliff and Jane in this episode as they go on a road trip. Cliff wants to see his daughter and finds her. He gets to her house. He wants to give her a late birthday present, this stuffed giraffe. She realizes who he is, the guy from the wake and everything, but she doesn't know who he is. He does finally get the nerve to tell her. However, she sees him kind of as crazy and rude and everything. And then he starts telling her things that really kind of convince her. It's very clear, even though it doesn't say anything, it's very clear visually that she is kind of getting convinced by this. But she's also not wanting to believe it, and she feels like she can't believe it. So she ends up calling the cops on him. And they just stand there basically watching him, making sure he doesn't do anything. They even can't really interfere when he starts attacking his own van or bus, yada yada. Because as they said, it's his bus. He can do whatever he wants to it technically. But they're just making sure he doesn't fuck up the party or hurt anyone. Unfortunately, cops are not this great in real life, but not going to get into that. I wouldn't even call them that great here. They're just standing around, really. They're not really doing anything. They're just there. But yeah, it's clear that there's a lot of work that would need to be done, especially with the way he handled that before he could actually talk to her. He handled that really poorly. Just the way he was speaking, the things he was saying, it's I get that he had become used to talking like that and thinking like that, but he can't do that with his daughter. If he wants to convince her, if he wants to get through to her and maybe even have some kind of relationship with her at some point, he needs to handle it a lot more delicately. Jane, meanwhile, keeps passing out because she is being dragged into her mind and having to deal with an intervention where the other personalities are basically threatening her, telling her that if she doesn't start to put them first, that they're going to take the spot of primary from her. Which apparently is a thing they can just do. I didn't think it quite worked like that, but okay. And we see kind of at the end of the episode that does seem to be what they're doing. Now, there's a lot to talk about with this entire thing, you could say. But I'm going to keep it kind of short here. To put it simply, this is an excessively toxic relationship that this is showcasing here. And it's actually not on Jane. Surprisingly enough, the toxicity is coming from the others. They're expecting her to put basically all of her focus, attention, and just care into them. That they're basically trying to force her to abandon her friends, the others in the house and everything, for their sake, because they think that Jane, as the primary, should be putting their needs first. And not just first, but completely above everything else. And that is a very is a very typical sign of a toxic relationship. If, using real life terms and situations here, if your partner is ever basically telling you that you need to focus the entirety of your attention on them, and that you can't really like be around or care about or care for anyone else, that's not a good thing. Like, yeah, of course you want to give your partner attention and everything, but you're allowed to have friends still, and you're allowed to hang out with and be around those friends. And if your partner tries to tell you otherwise, they're the ones in the wrong, not you. That's kind of the idea of what this episode seems to be going for with Jane. It's really upsetting, honestly. And I like that Jane actually sticks up for them and actually says it's like they're my family. Unfortunately, it doesn't end well, but I'm glad that Jane at least does that. The question is, if they are wresting control away from her, who would be their choice to put as the primary? That's the big question there. I assume this is going to be gone into next time. I assume that's the plan. We also have Dorothy playing some hide and go seek, and she accidentally drops and breaks Danny, which is not great. Though Niles kind of maybe implies that Danny can be fixed. So I don't know exactly where that's going. I hope so. Hope Danny's not just dead. That would be upsetting. I like Danny. They're awesome. But we'll see on that level. Yeah, it's just... This episode deals a lot with past traumas and past mistakes and issues stemming from past mistakes. Cliff having to deal with the past with his daughter and everything. Niles with his actions kind of coming to a head when he's confronted by Red Jack and everything. Larry and Rita with the past on how they met and got connected, and just the many things and many fears that they have about each other. Even Vic. Because Vic and this girl, I cannot think of her name, but they're getting very close to the point where they fuck. Just simply put, they fuck. And at first, Vic is very nervous about it because he's very self-conscious about his body and everything, but she shows him her body and the scars that she has and everything, presumably from war because she is a veteran, but I mean, it could be from a number of things. She shows him the scars and they get busy. They just do. Unfortunately, afterwards, she kind of retreats into her shell. It's made very clear that she's been burned before, as I said in the reaction. She's been with people before who have gotten her hopes up and have turned against her or ghosted her, or something like that, to where she doesn't trust people as much anymore. And so to her, she was kind of worried that he would leave her, that he wouldn't like stand tall on the promises of loving her. And so she was trying to see this as like a one night stand kind of situation. Vic tried to assure her, though, that he did genuinely like her and even invited her out on a date. Unfortunately, she got cold feet, and though she did send him an email, she never went in. She was sitting outside in the car and never went in, and you know that's going to be touched on some more going forward. But Vic and her both having to deal with the pains of their past and what led to their body image issues and all of that. This episode really did tackle that kind of thing, and I like that. I like how that was handled, even with Jane, because her entire thing was like dealing with the issues of what she had been doing and how the other personalities were taking that. And you could argue easily that, like, oh, they deal with these kinds of issues all the time, but this episode, I don't know, it just felt like it was consistently focused around that. um but yeah, so as I stated in the pre-thoughts, we are unfortunately having to take a break just due to Owl House coming back and needing that slot, because Owl House is a donation reward, so I gotta put in a donation reward slot, and unfortunately, we only have one donation reward slot for going forward with the new schedule. And Owl House is just one of those shows, like I said, that takes priority. It's kind of an important show to me at this point. It means that much to me, and it's like, so it kind of takes priority, and I have to kind of put it first since it came back. It was just like I said in the pre-thoughts, bad timing with everything. I did not time that well with starting Doom Patrol season 2 and getting this new schedule made and starting, the poll slot. Everything just kind of did not work out, because even if I just hadn't started the poll slot yet, I could have, like, basically had Amphibia be replaced by Owl House. But instead, obviously, things have had to be switched around and all, so yeah. But like I said, we will get back to Doom Patrol Season 2. Obviously, I'm very much enjoying this, like I said. So, this is something we will be getting back to. We're just taking a break from it for now. Whether that be after Owl House, or if something else, if I can figure out how to open something else up, I will. But in the meantime, we'll take it as it goes, basically. But yeah, tell me in the comments below what you thought of this episode of Doom Patrol, and thank you so much for tuning in. For now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.